Meet the Jeep Renegade Trailhawk, arguably the most talented member of the Renegade clan as far as 4x4 capability is concerned. Now, the Trailhawk moniker is typically reserved for those Jeeps that cope best with 4x4 conditions, which begs the question whether this little Jeep can really live up to that challenge. Given its youthful character and trendy target market, any criticism that the Renegade is not a real Jeep would seem to be irrelevant. But traditionalists will point out that the little SUV is more Fiat than Jeep. After all, it shares its underpinnings with a Fiat 500X. In many ways, the Trailhawk version of the Renegade is supposed to address some of those criticisms. Because of its off-road intentions, it stands 20mm taller than the normal version, which puts it at the same level as the larger Cherokee. Suspension travel has also been increased, and because of its short overhangs, it has great departure and approach angles. However, that doesn't mean that the Trailhawk loses the slightly left-of-centre character of its siblings. It's still an oddball all-terrainer with proportions that are more cartoon character than serious SUV. It's also unmistakably Jeep, thanks to the slotted grille, the round headlights and the upright silhouette. And yes, the wide tracks and raised stance seem to suggest that there's more to this Trailhawk version than curb hopping and boulevard cruising. One of the highlights of the Renegade is the interior, and this Trailhawk version is no different. It feels a lot roomier than expected given the compact dimensions of the vehicle, and one of the reasons is the fact that the front seats are set quite far back from the windscreen, which creates a really roomy effect. Also lots of space at the rear, lots of legroom and headroom, and the boot only adequate at 351 litres, but it can be extended by folding the rear bench seat flat. The cabin execution is pretty decent, with chunky switchgear and a couple of quirky touches, such as the mud graphics on the instruments. The cloth upholstery looks durable, and the list of comfort, convenience and safety kit is pretty much full house. The Uconnect touchscreen-based infotainment system works well, and the instruments can display a vast array of information, all selected via the multifunction steering wheel. The raised ride height makes for good all-round visibility, but those broad C-pillars sometimes get in the way. To me, one of the disappointments of this Renegade Trailhawk is the engine. It's a 2.4-litre four-cylinder engine credited with 137 kilowatt of maximum power and 236 newton meters of torque, but in practice it really doesn't feel as powerful. In fact, it's quite wheezy and quite peaky, and despite the 9-speed gearbox, it's quite difficult to keep it in the power band. We can only assume that Jeep opted for this engine because the Trailhawk is the only Renegade fitted with a low-range transfer case. Perhaps the engineers felt that the 2.4-litre engine's power delivery at crawling speeds over rough terrain would be more progressive. However, in day-to-day driving, the Fiat-sourced 1400 turbo engine on offer in other Renegade versions would be the better match. That said, a curb mass of just under 1.6 tonnes makes the bigger engine's initial tardiness feel worse than it really is. The ride quality of the Renegade is what you expect of a 4x4, slightly bouncy because of the taller stance and a bit on the taut side, although it does help to tell you what the vehicle is doing underneath you. On the open road though, very smooth, very composed and always controllable. Let's not forget that the Trailhawk is meant to be the off-road champion of the Renegade range, and that much of the vehicle's setup is geared towards coping with rough terrain. The low-range transfer case has a 20:1 crawl ratio and is accompanied by a four-wheel drive system offering various driving modes that can be selected to match the terrain being traversed. Hill descent control is standard too. The Renegade Trailhawk's trail-tested combination of a raised ride height, the extra suspension travel, the 4x4 traction of course, and most importantly the low range means it really easily crawls up and down over obstacles and never really feels challenged. However, the standard all-terrain tyres are still too on-road biased. Beefier sidewalls and a more aggressive tread pattern would further benefit off-road capability. The steering could be crisper too. Still, this Trailhawk version will get you places no other Renegade will. If you're looking for a real 4x4 in a more compact format, the Jeep Renegade Trailhawk is an obvious choice. Its combination of four-wheel drive with low range, together with its raised ride height and its very good approach and departure angles, give it true 4x4 capability. And despite those compact dimensions, it has a very roomy interior as well. In fact, this is a car that doesn't have any real rivals, which probably vindicates, at least to some extent, its rather steep asking price. It might look promising on paper, but the 2.4-litre engine isn't the Renegade Trailhawk's strongest suit. Still, it makes up for that peaky power plant with compact dimensions, a taller stance, a 9-speed auto gearbox and low-range four-wheel drive. The spacious, well-equipped cabin is another plus point. Pity about that price tag, though.